For 3 years, every Sunday evening followed the same pattern with such consistency that it became invisible. At exactly 6 p.m., my wife would grab her purse, kiss me on the cheek, and head out the door to what she always called her weekly girls' night with college friends. It was so routine that I stopped noticing it. Routine has a way of becoming background noise when nothing feels wrong. She always dressed casually, jeans, a soft sweater, comfortable shoes. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would raise questions. She took a little extra time with her hair and perfume, but I never thought much of it. She said it made her feel good to look nice, even around friends. I respected that. Everyone deserves a few hours to be themselves. I stayed home every Sunday with our 2 kids, ages 5 and 7. I cooked dinner, gave baths, read bedtime stories, and tucked them in. I never complained. In fact, I came to cherish those evenings. They were quiet and simple. Just me and the kids, popcorn on the couch, movies we had already seen a dozen times, blanket forts that collapsed halfway through the night. I trusted my wife completely. There was no suspicion, no second-guessing, no checking phones or statements. She had been doing these girls' nights since before we were married, before kids, before life became crowded with responsibility. It felt healthy, normal, even admirable. She usually came home around midnight, sometimes later. She would smile softly, kick off her shoes, and crawl into bed smelling like wine and that same expensive perfume. She always had stories. Who was stressed at work, whose relationship was falling apart, who was thinking about changing careers. The details were always believable. She mentioned names I remembered from years ago: Danielle, Monica, Lauren, Tasha. Women I had met briefly at our wedding. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was solid. We argued about chores and schedules, about money and exhaustion. But we laughed. We planned vacations. We talked about the kids' futures. Nothing about our life suggested betrayal. That is what makes betrayal so effective. It hides behind normalcy. Over time, Sundays became my favorite night of the week. I looked forward to being the fun parent, the one who bent bedtime rules and let the kids stay up too late. I never wondered where my wife was. I never imagined I needed to. And then, one Tuesday evening, everything ended. It was just after 7 p.m. The kids were asleep, and I was sitting on the couch watching television when I heard a knock at the front door. Not a casual knock. Not quick or confident. It was hesitant, uneven, like whoever was standing there wished they weren't. When I opened the door, my neighbor, Malcolm Johnson, stood on the porch holding his phone with both hands. His face was pale. His posture was stiff. He looked like someone walking into bad news. "I don't know how to say this," he said quietly. "And I wish I didn't have to be the one. But my wife said if it were her, she'd want to know." He didn't look at me. He stared at the phone like it might explode. My stomach tightened before he said another word. Something in his voice told me this wasn't small. Malcolm explained that the previous Sunday night, he had been downtown at a sports bar in Atlanta, the Copper Rail, celebrating a friend's birthday. Around 9:30 p.m., he walked past a booth near the back and stopped cold. "I saw your wife," he said. "But she wasn't with women." My heart began pounding so hard I felt dizzy. He told me he watched for several seconds, trying to convince himself he was mistaken. Then he recorded a short video because he knew words wouldn't be enough. When he finally held out his phone, my hands wouldn't move. I didn't want proof. Proof changes everything. "I'm sorry," he said. "Truly." I pressed play. The video was shaky at first, then clear. My wife sat in a booth, pressed against a man I had never seen before. His arm was around her shoulders. Her hand rested on his chest. They were kissing. Not awkwardly. Not uncertainly. Comfortably. Intimately. She was wearing the same clothes she had left our house with that night. The same necklace I had given her for our anniversary. She laughed between kisses. She looked happy. The timestamp read 9:37 p.m. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to check it to know what it was. Later, I would see the message she sent at 9:35. "Having so much fun with the girls tonight. Probably home late. Love you." I watched the video loop without breathing. 47 seconds dismantled 3 years. I handed the phone back to Malcolm and thanked him, though my voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I asked him to send me the video. He did. When the door closed, I sat alone in the dark. I didn't confront her that night. I needed to know everything before she could deny it. I opened our credit card statements and filtered for Sundays. The pattern was immediate. No restaurants she had ever mentioned. No wine bars. But charge after charge at the copper rail. Almost every Sunday. Always between $40 and $70. My hands shook as I logged into our family phone account and pulled up location history. Every Sunday told the same story. The bar. Then an apartment complex 15 minutes away. Then home. I searched the address. A modern building. Secure entry. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. 156 Sundays. When she came home that night, I had everything laid out. Statements. The video cued on our television. She walked in smiling, already talking about her evening. I let her finish. Then I pressed play. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled. She tried to explain. She tried to lie. She tried to shift blame. I showed her everything. Finally, she admitted his name was Andre Coleman. They met at a work conference 3 years earlier. Sundays were their time. She claimed it never interfered with our family. That was the moment something in me broke completely. I found his number saved under the name Danielle. The messages were intimate, loving, explicit. I called him. He answered, confused, then silent. I left a voicemail he could never erase. Andre Coleman was married. His wife's name was Nicole. I filed for divorce the next morning. The attorney called it one of the most documented cases of long-term adultery he had seen. I met Nicole 2 days later. I showed her everything. She cried the way I had cried alone. She filed as well. The night before my wife was served divorce papers, she asked me one final question. Is there anything I can do to fix this? I didn't answer, because at that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A new message. From a number I didn't recognize. It contained a single sentence. You don't know the whole truth about those Sundays. And that was when I realized. The story still wasn't over. I stared at the screen for a long moment, convinced I was misreading it. The message sat there, silent and heavy, from an unknown number with no name attached. You don't know the whole truth about those Sundays. No explanation. No follow-up. Just that single line, dropped into my life like a match into gasoline. My wife noticed the change in my expression immediately. Her eyes flicked to my phone, then back to my face. What is it? She asked, her voice tight. I didn't answer. I locked the screen and stood up, suddenly feeling like the room was closing in on me. Who sent that? She pressed, standing as well. There was fear in her voice now, but also something else, recognition. That realization settled over me like ice water. Whatever this message meant, she knew exactly what it was referring to. You said it was only Sundays, I said slowly. You said it never touched our family life. My voice was calm, but it felt hollow. So tell me why someone would say I don't know the whole truth. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Silence stretched between us, thick and unbearable. That silence answered my question better than any words could have. There's more, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded once, barely visible. Yes. She sat back down on the couch like her legs could no longer support her. I remained standing, my arms crossed, bracing myself for whatever was about to come next. After everything I had already uncovered, I thought I was numb. I was wrong. Andre wasn't the first, she said quietly. He wasn't even the only one. The words landed with a dull thud rather than a sharp sting, as if my emotions had finally hit a limit and shut down to protect me. I waited, letting her continue at her own pace, knowing interruption wouldn't make this easier. She told me that the Sunday nights had started as an escape long before Andre entered the picture. The first year, she really did meet friends sometimes. Other times, she sat alone in bars, convincing herself she deserved freedom, excitement, something that felt like her old self. Over time, those nights became something darker, a space where she stopped being accountable to anyone. Andre came later. After him, there was another man briefly, then another conversation she claimed never went anywhere. She insisted Andre was the only long-term affair, the only one who mattered. But by then, the distinction meant nothing. So how many Sundays? I asked. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. I stopped counting. The message suddenly made sense. Someone else. Another man. Someone who had realized he was disposable or discovered he wasn't the only secret. Someone who decided I deserved to know. I left the house that night and drove aimlessly through Atlanta until my hands stopped shaking. When I pulled over, I called the number back. It rang twice before going to voicemail. No greeting. Just silence. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I texted back one sentence of my own. If you know something, say it. The reply came 10 minutes later. Meet me tomorrow. You should hear this in person. There was an address attached. A diner off Peachtree Street. Public. Neutral. Intentional. I didn't tell my wife where I was going. I didn't owe her that anymore. The man sitting in the booth looked familiar the moment I saw him. Not because I knew him, but because I had seen him before, in reflections, in passing moments that never registered. He stood when I approached, nervous but determined. His name was Caleb Harris. He was black, mid-30s, well-spoken, dressed like someone who had come straight from work. He didn't waste time with apologies or small talk. I dated your wife, he said. Not on Sundays. On weekdays. Lunch breaks. Early evenings. While you were at work. I sat down slowly, every muscle in my body tight. Caleb explained that he had ended things when he realized he wasn't the only secret. He found Andre's name in her phone months earlier. When he confronted her, she told him I already knew. That I had accepted it. That we had an arrangement. I believed her, he said. Until I saw you coaching your kid's soccer game last weekend. You didn't look like a man who knew. That was when he sent the message. I left the diner knowing one thing with absolute certainty. The woman I married was not who I thought she was. The betrayal wasn't just physical or emotional. It was architectural. It was built into the structure of our life. When I returned home, the house was quiet. My wife was asleep on the couch again. I stood there watching her for a moment, wondering how many versions of her I had never known. The divorce papers would be served in the morning. Custody discussions would follow. Lawyers would dissect our lives into bullet points and evidence exhibits. But as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, another thought settled in, one that refused to let me rest. If there were this many lies I uncovered by accident, how many were still buried? And who else knew the truth before I did? The divorce papers were served the next morning just after 9. I was already at work when my phone buzzed with a notification from my attorney confirming delivery. I sat at my desk staring at the screen, feeling nothing at first, then everything at once. Relief. A strange, quiet certainty that there was no turning back. When I came home that evening, the house felt different. The air was heavier, like the walls themselves were aware something had broken. My wife sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee growing cold in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, folded inward, stripped of the confidence she had carried so easily for years. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just asked, "Are you really doing this?" As if everything that had happened was still negotiable. I told her yes. That was the only answer I had left. The kids sensed it immediately. Children always do. They asked why Mommy was crying so much, why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room, why voices got quiet when they entered the room. We told them we were working through grown-up problems. It felt like another lie layered on top of too many already. That night, after they were asleep, my wife tried one last time to reach me. She apologized, not defensively this time, but desperately. She said she hated herself. She said she felt broken. She said she never meant for it to go this far. I listened without interrupting, then told her something I had been holding back since the beginning. Intent doesn't undo impact, I said. And remorse doesn't rebuild trust. She nodded, finally understanding that this wasn't a negotiation, rather it was an ending. The weeks that followed were brutal in a quieter way. Lawyers took over our lives, reducing years of marriage to documents, timelines, and exhibits. My wife's attorney attempted a predictable strategy, painting her as overwhelmed, lonely, emotionally neglected. They hinted that my focus on work had pushed her away. It might have worked if there hadn't been evidence. So much evidence. Video. Messages. Financial records. Location data. 3 years of consistency that told a story no amount of emotional framing could erase. The judge listened without expression, occasionally asking pointed questions that cut through excuses. When custody was discussed, my attorney presented calendars, school records, testimony about who handled bedtime, homework, doctor appointments. Sundays became a quiet but powerful detail, the nights I was always home. My wife avoided my eyes when the judge granted me primary custody. Not out of spite, the judge said, but stability. Accountability. Patterns matter. When court adjourned that day, my wife broke down in the hallway. I walked past her. Not because I hated her, but because I no longer recognized her as someone I could save. Andre's life unraveled quickly. His wife finalized the divorce within months. Caleb faded out of the picture entirely. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my wife lost friends too, not because they judged her, but because they no longer trusted her version of reality. One evening, months later, my kids asked me a question I had been dreading. Is Mommy coming back to live with us? I knelt in front of them and told them the truth in the simplest way I could. That Mommy loved them very much, but sometimes adults make choices that change where families live. That none of this was their fault. They accepted it more easily than I expected. Children adapt faster than adults. They haven't yet learned to romanticize broken things. My wife and I had one final conversation, sitting across from each other at the dining table where we once planned birthdays and vacations. She admitted something she had never said out loud before. I didn't cheat because I stopped loving you, she said. I cheated because I stopped knowing who I was. I believed her. And for the first time, I understood that understanding and forgiveness are not the same thing. I wished her peace. I meant it. Then I let her go. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Mornings with school lunches and rushed goodbyes. Evenings with homework and quiet dinners. The absence hurt less as routine filled the gaps. One afternoon, while sorting through old documents for tax purposes, I found something I hadn't seen before. A folded receipt tucked into the back of a file folder. It was dated 4 years earlier. A Sunday. From a bar I didn't recognize. The date hit me harder than anything else had. It was from 3 months before our youngest was born. I sat there for a long time, staring at that small piece of paper, realizing the timeline I thought I understood still wasn't complete. That the lie may have begun before the chapter of my life I had believed was still pure. I never confronted her about it. Some truths arrive too late to change anything. They exist only to be acknowledged. That night, after my kids were asleep, I stood in the doorway of their room and watched them breathe, steady and peaceful. Whatever else had been stolen from me, this moment had not. I turned off the light, closed the door, and walked away knowing one final thing. The betrayal didn't define my life. But the day I stopped believing the lies, that was the day my life actually began.